Joey, got any papaya?
Oh, no, I'm not big on papaya.
How about guava?
Oh, I don't know. I'll check. I'm heading down to the
Two Cat Kitchen. It's time for us to pitch in and start another Two Cat show. Down at the Two Cat Kitchen, we're starting on a mission to put you in the culinary know. We've got the finest recipes you ever will find, guaranteed to show you all a mighty fine time here at the Two Cat Kitchen. Time for a new edition of the Culinary Two Cat Show. The Culinary Two Cat Show.
Welcome to the Two Cat Kitchen, the show that mixes musical mayhem with culinary calamity. Rick McKinney is here to help with the mixin'.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the kitchen.
Each episode features new songs, a brand new recipe, and a special musical guest. Who's our guest today?
Today, we're joined by a good friend of ours, guitarist, singer, and songwriter, Jack McDonald.
Every show also includes an informative segment. What do we have for the people today?
Today, we have our friend, Mr. O'Malley. He's back, and he'll be taking the mystery out of history. And speaking of history, I see the Coconotes are gone again. Any idea where they are?
They got cast as the three wise men in a Christmas pageant.
No kidding.
But there's only two of them, so they brought a cat, and they'll be bringing gold, frankincense, and purr.
It makes sense. All right, well, I guess we'll make our way over to Studio C and talk to today's musical guest. We'll be right back. We're back at the Two Cat Kitchen, and we're here with our musical guest. It's Jack McDonald. Jack, thanks for joining us on the Two Cat Kitchen.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Jack is a singer, songwriter, guitar player, plays a little mandolin, done a lot of music over the years, and so I think we're going to get right into your kind of musical history. So tell us, when did you actually get into music? So going way back, did you play in high school? Did you do music in high school?
I did not. I briefly played trumpet in elementary school and realized that I had wanted nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And I didn't get into playing any music until buying this junky old guitar in college. And, the usual reasons that every musician gives. It seems like you're somebody that...
He's trying to attract girls.
Attract girls and all of that. Just be part of a crowd that I admired.
Yeah.
And
What kind of guitar did you get? Do you remember? Or?
I have no idea. It was probably had horrible action and all that. Eventually, I did, once I played for a little while, I went down to Caruso's Music Store, which is down in New London, and picked up a Westerly Guild. And from there, I just started I'm going to try and figure this thing out.
Yeah. So actually, just for context, for our listeners, we're in southern New England here, southern Rhode Island area, and New London, Connecticut is where you're actually. And Jack, you live in Arizona now.
I live in Tucson now. I've been there for a number of years, and we maintain a place here in Rhode Island, and my wife Liz and I come back for the summer. We've kind of become those people in this tourist area that clog things up.
No, it's great, and we're in your beautiful house in Rhode Island right now. But anyway, getting back to your guitar, so you picked up a Guild. Now, Guild guitars, they were a really solid brand of guitar. I remember they were made in Rhode Island, I believe, right?
That's right. This one was. It was still made. They were still making them in Westerly, Rhode Island at that point.
And that's where it started, right?
It started there, yeah. I don't know the full story, but I think they brought luthiers over from Europe and it's very well respected guitar.
Yeah, and it's a Rhode Island treasure. And I guess they sold out, right, to Fender or something like that.
They sold out to Fender, and I think as usual the quality went down a bit. But the one I got was a good one.
Yeah, so you got a guitar in college, and there you go. So, what kind of music did you gravitate towards? I mean, I know what music you ended up playing, but
I was I started out, of course, when I was younger, rock and roll, all the things that everybody plays. But I eventually sort of drifted towards the band, Allman Brothers, Grateful Dead kind of thing, and from there. Started to find out about more, which I guess would now be called Americana music, but bluegrass and other stuff. And I became a lot more interested in that kind of stuff. And so folk music. And I also realized that a lot of that stuff, basic 3-chord stuff, maybe a minor thrown in, was easy to learn.
Yeah.
And fun. And, learn songs I liked. I could figure them out and play them. And eventually I just learned them and then would go to parties and play them.
Yeah, that's great. And so like folk rock stuff, maybe to start off. And,
that kind of stuff.
So we're talking college.
We're talking
for both of us, it was back in the 70s, right?
Yeah, I started college in 72 here at University of Rhode Island.
Yeah. So that back in those days, like bands like the Grateful Dead and the band and they were like that was like pop music almost, but not pop music,
but it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. And
there
were still all the these other types of bands that
but
I think the majority
music,
of people listen to. But I gravitate. As a matter of fact, there was this festival that called Watkins Glen that I went to, and it featured those 3 bands: the Dead, the Allman Brothers, and the band. And it was your basic hippie festival, big one up in Watkins Glen, New York.
Yeah, that was in New York, right?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that's great.
So I started going to those things. And
and then so then you started. How did you get into playing with bands and things along those lines? Or did you play like solo stuff? Or?
A little bit. I played. I would just jam with people, basically living room kind of stuff, and occasionally something would come up. It was like, oh, we're doing a coffee house, and why don't you come down? And so I would do it, and I was starting to experiment with writing songs, and I would play a couple of my things and other things that I knew, and then there were a couple of friends of mine that I would get together with, and we would do these kind of like open mic sort of things.
I see. Yeah.
No money or any of that, but just fun to get out there and play and get a sense of what it's like. So that's how it started.
I almost think that I want to say that maybe there was a little bit more of that going on back then, like open mic stuff and just kind of informal jamming. But I think there's quite a lot of it going on today.
There is some. There's a local place here that has a jam, some kind of jam session once a week, and other ones that do stuff. But it's not. I think it was more prevalent back then. The folk music scene was big. There's Bob Dylan and all these people that kind of brought people out of the woodwork like myself. Yeah. Who was like, oh, I can play that, and I like it. That person's songs, and so yeah. 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 I mean, Bob Dylan had definitely fueled a generation of musicians. Oh yeah, he was a big influence on me, and I learned a lot of his songs.
He just wrote so much stuff that
so prolific.
Appeals different character stuff that appeals to different people too. So that's great.
I love this stuff. I still do.
Yeah, and so maybe we can talk a little bit. So that was in college. You were doing that.
A little bit of that, yeah.
And then you got So Jack and I go way back. We were in a band. I believe it was in the 80s, I think?
It might have been in the 80s, yeah.
But it was a fun time. And
it was, yeah.
And we did some stuff and had some crazy times. And, it was so long ago, I can't remember any specific stories. Other than one thing, I remember we played at a wedding in...
up in like Vermont or something.
Is it Vermont? Was it Vermont? I want to say Okemo. Is that in Vermont?
That's in Vermont, yeah.
And it was in the summer, so it wasn't like a ski thing.
Right.
But there was the wedding was at the resort,
Right.
and we were the band or a band, and we were put up in a condo that was sort of up on the mountain.
Oh yeah, I
And
forgot about that place.
we had a bunch of equipment, and one of the members in the band, who will remain nameless, had a pickup truck that did not have the greatest brakes.
Oh, I know.
And I remember we were coming down with all the equipment, me and this person in his pickup, and we were gaining speed. It was downhill. It was down the side of a mountain on a road, and it was like, hey, we're going a little bit fast. We're going even faster. It's becoming hard to take these corners. So I asked the fellow, what's going on? I looked over, and he had both feet on the brakes, desperately trying to stop the truck.
Right. Yeah.
His brakes went out. His brakes overheated going
Right.
down the mountain. And I was like, for a split second, I was like, holy moly,
This is how it
the
ends.
end. But luckily, they had those gravel turnoffs for like people that
Yeah.
lost their brakes.
Yeah.
And he hit one of those, and that stopped us. And it was
Yeah.
like, holy moly.
Yeah, I have a very vague
That-
recollection of that.
That
Yeah.
was one thing
Yeah.
that I remember. And maybe I'm not telling the story right, but
Yeah.
it was definitely an interesting situation.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great time. Basically, we were all friends, and it was about hanging out, and and then having these gigs, and we'd go up, and it was fun.
Yeah,
it
and
was
we would-
really a lot of fun. We enjoyed each other's.
I think we
company.
would go up whitewater rafting once in a while up in Maine.
Yeah, that's right.
And hang out and play in a club, and then go rafting during the day. That was a blast.
That was really fun.
And
Yeah.
so anyway,
there's a
it
lot
was-
of those kind of things.
And that was. And what kind of music did we do? I mean, it was kind of like.
Well,
it was
we were called bluegrass,
Yeah.
and we sort of were, but we were also bluegrass with a kind of a rock and roll tinge to it, because we would bring in songs that were, not necessarily from the bluegrass songbook. Nowadays, that's commonplace. But
Yeah.
when I look back on it, there weren't that many people doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe not.
Just taking those kind of songs and putting bluegrass instruments on them, and we'd play them, and it was, so that kind of stuff.
I think we did Rock and Robin.
We did a bunch of things like that. Yeah. Later on, I get into some stuff that with a banjo player with a phase shifter and all kinds of wacky stuff. But yeah.
Shine your light upon me, brother. Shine your light to the shore, like the way we walk together, and we weep and cry no more. Through this world.
Okay, so that was early on. That was in early days. What are some of the other bands that you've played with over the years?
Let's see. Well, after
know a
we
few
were
of them, but I've
sort of
lost track.
summarily dismissed from a steady bar gig that we had, the guy said, "Yeah, here's all your money, and your drinks are on me tonight." And I remember that was pretty much the end of that band.
Yeah.
And then I stuck it out with one of the guys in the band, and we got together with a bass player, and it was called Biscuit City. And there's another band now called that, but it was named after the street I lived on.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so there's a bass player and this guy Larry we talked about earlier, and myself, and just a trio. And it was really fun. We got a lot of gigs, and we got a lot better, and we played all over, and that was really fun too. And then that kind of died off eventually as
What
bands
kind of
tended
song?
to-
What kind of music were you guys doing?
It was
at that
still
point?
the bluegrass stuff, but we were
Okay.
heading more towards like what one would call Americana these days, and
Okay.
more of the taking rock songs and turning them into like we did just rock and roll kind of stuff, but with bluegrass instruments.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so that was a good one, and that broke up when the guy ended up getting a caretaking gig on an island off the coast of Massachusetts. And
Oh,
so
okay.
So that ended, and then we used to go out there on the island. It was great. Like they come out for a weekend and we'd play there, and there was just cows. And did you ever go to one of those?
I think so. I
National?
can't totally
Yeah.
remember,
It was
but
great.
So the cows enjoyed it.
The cows enjoyed it. The cows would show up. And, there was nobody out there. There was a few houses.
So what were the cows doing out there?
I don't know. The cows would just show up and very inquisitive. And,
So
were
were they like feral
music.
cows
Okay.
or something? Or they
Come
just
again?
Were they feral cows or were somebody?
No, they were raising these cows.
Oh, so they were some
Scottish
people.
Highlanders, I believe they were called. Okay. And they also had a whole mess of sheep. And we would go out there for the weekend, drive the sheep across the island so they could be sheared. And we made we'd make a whole day of that. And we'd be out there for the weekend, so we'd get all the sheep in, and then we'd just play music and drink beer, and it was great.
Yeah.
And so but that band, so he moved out there for a while, and that band ended up going away.
In addition to your many musical talents and endeavors, you also owned your own business for quite a while.
I did.
And
I got out of college, and I was not driven to. I had a degree in agriculture, and it would have meant leaving New England, where I was very fond of living here. I love this area, where South County, Rhode Island, it was back in the day, and still is a beautiful, beautiful place. But it would have meant me moving to get a job that I was trained for, and I just wasn't ready, and so I just took these part-time jobs, and one of them was and part of it was that I didn't want to get something too rigorous, because I like playing music, and I like the freedom of and I wasn't driven by money at all. It was more, I want to live a good life and grow gardens and all that kind of stuff. I became a painting contractor, and it was a good job. It was hard work. It was, labor intensive and all that. And as you know, having been one of my sheep at one point, and a lot of people, there were so many people from this community that worked for me. They would come and go, and it was always nice. And I was more into the criteria for me having somebody work for me was, can I get along with this person? And then after that, the second thing was, and do I think they can paint? And, unfortunately for certain, customers, there was some learning on the job. But, in the end, I honed my craft, and I ended up in some really nice places, and ended up, most of my stuff was, along the coast. We're a coastal community here, and very wealthy people, and we gave them what they wanted and charged accordingly, and it was a good livelihood. I went back to school, RISD, and got some of my design chops in interior design, and was able to use that as well.
Yeah, you were interested. Yeah, I mean, you were helping with design and
So I did. Some things got designed eventually that I and built that I designed. But it was, the painting thing was where the bread and butter was. Yeah. And I had crews, and I did that my whole life.
Climbing up the mountain, children, where your faith will be restored. Light the way we walk together, and we weep and cry no more.
We're back here at the Two Cat Kitchen with Jack McDonald. So, Jack, you've written a number of songs over the years, and I was wondering about your approach to songwriting. How did you get into writing songs? Is it something you always wanted to do, or?
Well, not really. No, it came about. I was already painting, and I spent a lot of time by myself on a ladder. And so I just thought, well, it'd be cool to, and these things would come into my head, and I'd be like, oh, maybe I can, do something with that. And so I would kind of compose these songs in my head, and eventually I would, I'd come to the point where I was like, oh, I got to write some of these down or I'm going to forget it. And, more often than not, I forgot what I was thinking about. But every now and then I'd get enough stuff to put down into a song, and I wasn't all that dedicated about it. And I got to say, I wasn't all that. I certainly wasn't schooled in it, and a lot of the stuff I came up with, looking back on it, I could have done better had I really put my mind to it. But for the times and for what I was doing, it was perfect, and or not perfect, but it was fine. and I enjoyed it, and it was it was fun, and it was great to be able to create something and then have it go out there. So
have other people play.
have other people play, and have other people play along, and all that stuff.
So I have played a number of your songs, at least 3 or 4, I think, and I like them all. And one thing I really appreciate about your songwriting, I don't know if this was a conscious thing or not, but you wrote songs about things that you experienced maybe, and then maybe about people that you knew, but you always made it sound like sort of, it wasn't, you couldn't tell that it was about somebody you knew. It was kind of a more general approach to the songwriting, which I think was good. It was more relatable.
Yeah, I mean that was on my mind, that you get too particular, and
Right.
that's it.
If you're writing about somebody that that exhibits
you want them
a certain,
to know sometimes.
it could be embarrassing, but you always
Right.
had a knack for making the songs come out, like talking about a certain behavior of a person or something like that,
Right,
or an
right,
approach of a person, but you could never figure out who it was exactly you were talking about. It was kind of a more general thing, as what I'm trying to say.
And
that makes
did
it
try
more
to do that.
relatable to other people, I think, because other people can say, "Oh, I know somebody like that," and it's
Right.
not, because it's not about a specific person. It's just
Yeah, and that's probably that's what a songwriter should strive for.
and I
would
actually
think.
picked up on that when I started writing songs. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good way to approach it," and that's the way I always wanted to do
cool.
it. So
you
it
write
kind
some
of
great
inspired
ones.
me on that. And then you also wrote some topical songs about topics of the day, or that express the point of view, which is good too. And that's great. So anyway, here's a couple of specific questions that I always like to ask people that write songs. Is, I know how I do it, and the big question is, do you get the lyrics first and then come up with a melody, or do you just get a melody in your head and then it's like, oh yeah, I got it?
Right. It kind of depended on what I was doing. Many things that I did, and again, I wasn't all that prolific, but some of them. It could have gone either way. I would have these lyrics in my mind, and then come up with, some kind of chord structure, and then alter the lyrics to accommodate the chord structure. Or, I would just have some little musical riff that I was fiddling around with, and something would just pop into my head, and it'd be like, oh yeah, and then I would have a topic of sorts, and kind of go with that and explore that. So that's sort of how I did it.
Okay, so like a mixed approach. That's kind of the way.
I wasn't a dedicated. I wasn't one of these like good songwriters that would get up in the morning and sit down at their table, and I was never that guy. I was just like, maybe I'll do this, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. And and my experience has been, it's always the lyrics that just show up in your head that are the best.
The ones that's right. And you'll hear that from a lot of songwriters.
The ones that consciously you're thinking about trying to craft,
right.
for me anyway, are like freaking horrible. And it's the ones that just pop in that are like, oh, yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah,
oh, okay. Anyway.
I love the stories of bands somebody will say, how did you write that song? And I'm like, well, I was on the way to the recording session and we needed another song. And then this car, drove in front of me, and blah, blah, and the next thing I knew, I was, that kind of stuff that just spur of the moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're the hit. But,
that sounds like a common experience, definitely. And then another question I had, how did you feel like when you would write a song and then you were in a band situation and you'd present it to the band, and how would you feel about the band doing your song? I mean, did you feel like you're imposing on them, like asking them to do your song, or?
Not really. I felt like, at least all the people I played with, we were a very egalitarian bunch, and we're friendly, and so, if somebody brought something in, everybody gave it a shot, see if. Well, yeah, okay, we'll try that. And, there were a couple of things that I threw out there, and I gathered what the response was, and it's like, okay, that's not going to fly.
Okay,
but for the most part, I had a sense that, okay, this is a good thing, and this would be good for our band, and we could do that. So that's sort of how I did it.
Yeah, and okay, so you had a band situations where people were open to doing original songs.
Yeah, we were. I like to think that we were friends, at least most of the bands, friends first, and musicians as part of that. But also, it was more important that we were friendly, and so that meant everybody kind of giving everybody a shot, and I was fortunate enough on occasion to get some of my stuff out there, as did other people that I played with. So it was great.
All right. Well, we're going to hear one of your songs right now. We got together a while back with members of the Coconotes, and we put together our version of That's What Friends Are For. Let's check it out.
Settle down, boy, get a grip on where you're going. Take another look, the hard life you've been living showing. So hung up on staying free, you're losing sight of those you need. I don't know where you have been, but I'll stick around once again. 'Cause that's what friends are for. Oh, that's what friends are for. Yeah, I remember back when we were young, having fun. Stay up all night and laugh until the morning come. But you quit your reaching for the sky. You lost that sparkle in your eye. But I've been your friend through thick and thin, so I'll stick around once again. That's what friends are for. Oh, that's what friends are for. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Open up your eyes and listen to your sense of reason, and you will realize that compromise can leave you freedom. And when it's all been said and done, we'll finish strong like we've begun. We'll be friends like we had been, so I'll stick around once again. 'Cause that's what friends are for. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what friends are for. Oh, that's what friends are for. And I've been your good friend. That's what friends are for.
Jack, one thing we ask everybody here on the Two Cat Kitchen is, what was your earliest musical memory?
Well, I go back to my grandfather on my father's side. He was a musician, and he graduated from, I believe, the first class of Boston Conservatory. And he was mainly a piano player, but he could play violin, he could play saxophone. He wasn't doing much of that. He was pretty old when I was coming up. But the piano was always there, and every now and then he'd get down and play on it. So as a little kid, I'd hear a little bit of that when we go visit my grandfather. He pretty much stopped doing most of it during the Depression. There was and there wasn't a market for bands. He had a bunch of bands and all that stuff, and actually had a dance hall on the Connecticut River. Lost it all. So my parents were not. My mother wasn't really musical. My father thought that music was just not something. He did not encourage me or anybody in our family. We were all given the obligatory. Okay, you get to have I played trumpet for a part of a year. And my sisters got piano lessons until they hated it and that kind of stuff. But I would, I remember that part of growing up. So that's probably my first one. And eventually, despite my parents' lack of interest in music, I mean, literally, we did not have a stereo or any of that stuff. We had a radio. And my father listened to Red Sox games and stuff like that. Music was not a part of my family growing up.
Yeah, they just weren't into music.
They just weren't into it. I mean, he was into sports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And my mother had one of 7 kids, and so you know what she was into, like keeping us all going. But so I didn't get any of that stuff, and it didn't. So that was pretty much my first musical experience. thinking about it. And I eventually, I always kept that in mind. And I remember one story where I wanted to play the drums. And I think I was in junior high school, and this song came out. It was called Inagata Davida, and there was this drum solo, and it's this iconic drum solo in this, it's for this rock band, and I wanted to play the drums, and so I got drumsticks for Christmas, and we had this leather chair, and I would sit myself with my legs over the arm and whack away on this thing, make a racket. My parents hated it, of course, and
but you got the sticks, though.
Yeah, but I did have the sticks, and so I wanted to keep going with it. And when I finally, this was, my father, neither of them were interested in that. And so when it came time for me, I wanted to play guitar, and he says, well, call your grandfather up. He was a musician, and so I did. And I think they had already arranged this. And my grandfather, I called him up and said, I want to play the drums. He says, anybody can play the drums. Why don't you take up something like the saxophone or the trumpet? And I was not interested in any of that. So that pretty much put that all to rest until I got into college and, started to see people playing music. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to give this another shot where I'm not being thwarted by, my parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you turned out okay musically.
Yeah, I took it. And it's a funny story. Is my brother, two of my brothers actually, one in particular, became a drummer, and he was the drummer for the high school band. He was 4 or 5 years younger than me, and they all practiced in our basement. I was already in college, and I would come back, and they'd all be hanging out there, and my mother would say, "Oh, it's so nice to hear Jimmy play and with his band and stuff." And I look downstairs, and there's all these kids are all stoned, and they're just they're all hanging out, and it's just rock and roll, and it was and I thought it was great. I was like, God, I wish I had been given this opportunity, but
he broke through.
He broke through. He was able to finally
do it.
He
wore him down.
Yeah, right. He wore him down. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, his kids all ended up being good musicians. My kids are musicians as well. I've got one in L.A. who's a professional musician. My son Tom, who's a very good songwriter and excellent guitar player and other instruments and stuff. And that's what he's doing. So, I mean, we always kept instruments around the house when they were growing up, and they, they both of them, they were given opportunities to play and stuff. So I was determined not to have that happen to them. We wanted to expose them to music, and indeed it took.
Did either one of your kids want to be a drummer?
No, but Tom, the one that's in L.A., he can play drums. I mean, some of his stuff he puts out, he'll do the drums on it. He can play anything, really, and it's cool. I had a drum set. At our house, we had a drum set. We had vibes. We had a keyboard thing. Matter of fact, when Tom was maybe, I don't know, he couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, and we were going out to dinner, and like, where's Tom? Can't find him. And I go back in the house, and he's in front of this little Casio keyboard that I had set up, and he's picking out this tune. It's one of those ones where you could get a rhythm thing going, and you could change the key. And so he's got it in another key, wasn't C. So he's got it in another key, and he's got this rhythm going, and he's picking this stuff out, and I was just flabbergasted, so I was like, oh, I got to get this kid lessons, he's obviously got something, and
he was,
and there you go,
it.
there,
yeah, that's crazy, that's
cool.
Great,
yeah, so
all right, oh, great story, thanks, Jack.
Yeah,
we'll be right back.
Gather round, people,
right now.
Got a story to tell.
Listen up well.
Do you want to be saved?
Oh, burning in the fires of hell.
In those fires of hell, well, heed the call. You'll have it all when you reach those pearly gates. But you can't take it with you. Won't you leave it in the plate? 'Cause it don't
walk across no river.
It won't
part a raging sea.
It can't
change your faucet water. Get them drunks to take a drink.
But when it
Goes to church on Sunday. Well, it makes the preacher sing.
It may be the root of evil, but it
loves that mighty green.
We'll do a little praying,
oh Lord,
about an hour a week.
or more.
But don't you be napping,
No sleeping when the preacher speaks.
when that preacher speak, and you better be ready for the reason we are gathered in his name, 'cause you know he will be watching what you're putting in the plate. 'Cause it don't walk across no river, it won't part a raging sea, it can't change a glass of water into your evening drink. But when it goes to church on Sunday, well, it makes the preacher sing. It may be the root of evil, but it loves that mighty green. Tammy and Jimmy,
Which Jim?
oh, the other Jim too,
That's who.
are gonna be baking
And breaking that bread with you.
yeah, me and you. So you better just fatten up those envelopes. When you meet your fate, they'll send you down below the ground for passing up the plate. 'Cause it don't walk across no river, it won't part a raging sea, it can't change your glass of water into your favorite drink. But when it goes to church on Sunday, well, it makes the preacher sing. It may be the root of evil, but it loves that mighty green. Yeah, it may be the root of evil, but it loves that mighty green.
All right, we're back at the Two Cat Kitchen, and we have Arya and Bryce here, and today's recipe is going to be pizza. But you guys make a great pizza, and you're going to tell us how we do it. We're going to go over it right now. To start, the foundation of the pizza is the crust.
The crust.
So how do you make your dough?
Oh boy. Well,
It's very simple.
we did was 1.5 cups of flour to start.
Okay. And just what kind of flour do you use?
We often use all-purpose, but today we had the double O.
Double O.
Yeah.
Is that like an Italian flour or?
Yeah. You can
Yeah.
get it like actually imported from Italy, and
Oh.
real pizza aficionados probably would prefer that.
Yeah.
But we find that organic all-purpose flour works really great, and that's
Okay.
a lot easier to come
So
by.
either one. Okay. All right. 1.5 cups flour.
And then 2 teaspoons of yeast.
2 teaspoons of yeast, like an active yeast or
Yeah.
instant yeast.
Yeah.
Any kind of yeast doesn't totally matter.
Also,
Okay.
pizza is great with sourdough. So if you do sourdough starter, you just throw a little bit of that in there. and
Oh, no
then-
kidding. Okay. All right.
It's a little wetter, but
Yeah.
manage.
All right. And then so we have flour, yeast, something else.
Half teaspoon of salt.
Half teaspoon of salt.
And then we'll mix 3/4 cup of warm water and maybe a little bit of some sort of sweetener. So like honey, I think we use.
Okay. So you mix the sweetener in with the water, the warm water, 3/4 cup. Okay.
And then you'll, well, first I would whisk the dry, and then once I add the water, I would combine it and then knead it for a couple minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Nice.
Knead it till it's smooth. but
Smooth.
Don't go at it like crazy.
So then while that's rising, we
Oh, how do
preheat.
you put it for rising? So then you.
Oh, we'll
you-
cover it with a little oil. Keep it in
Okay.
the bowl with
In the bowl.
like
Yeah.
a cloth over it.
Yeah,
And
okay.
try to keep it warm.
Keep it in a warm place, not too warm, but okay. All right, so now the dough is rising, let's say,
Yeah.
in our little hypothetical situation here, and then you're gonna make what sauce?
Yeah.
Well, while we're making the sauce, we've probably preheated the oven
Oh,
with the stone in it so it can get real hot.
Yeah. Using a baking stone is a
oh, baking stone.
very good idea
Yeah.
for the pizza.
You gotta have a
Want it-
baking stone
yeah,
for pizza.
Nice big baking stone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Put it in there and
Middle.
set your oven. Yeah, about in the middle of the oven seems to work best. That is
Okay.
how, actually you were asking earlier, how do we know the bottom's not burned? And it's because over time we figure out where to put the stone so that the top cooks really good and the bottom cooks really good.
I get
and
it.
it seems
So-
like right in the middle of the oven you get a good even.
All right. You might need a little trial and error to figure out for your particular oven. And then you turn your oven up as high as it'll go. This is what blows my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, Bryce, you had an idea that you heard about an idea to get your oven to go even higher.
Right.
Which I thought was great.
Yeah, I've heard from an associate that you can, if your oven has a self-clean function, then you can use that, and if it has a lock that you need to engage for the self-clean function, you can disable the lock so that you can still open your oven when you need to check and see if your pizza's done. But
Okay.
the self-clean function on an oven just makes it run as hot as it will run.
So, and this would be so. This is a pro tip here at the Two Cat Kitchen: disable your self-clean lock and turn it on self-clean. I like it.
We were just at 510.
Right. And that you
Yeah.
get good results.
Yeah.
Anywhere around 500 will do.
500. Okay, so we want to try to get up to 500.
490 if you.
And if you're feeling bold, then self-clean it. But anyway, okay. So now
Then the sauce.
the sauce. Okay,
So we just get canned tomatoes
canned tomatoes.
and crush them up.
Crush them.
But we'll start with onion and garlic and some olive oil at the bottom of the pot.
Mince up some garlic and onion, a lot. Use a lot because it's good. Then in the pot that you're going to make the sauce in, put also nice good amount of olive oil, probably like I don't know, 3 tablespoons for 1 or 2 cans of tomatoes.
Okay.
And put in your garlic and onions. Let that on like a medium low heat. Like they should sizzle when you throw them in there, but they'll cook pretty quick, so you don't need it to be raging.
Okay.
So let those just get a little bit browned up, and then put in your other herbs like oregano, basil, just a little bit of that. Probably, I don't know, a teaspoon, half a teaspoon to start.
Okay.
Of both of those. Put those into the oil, let them kind of cook in there for a minute, and then put in a splash of balsamic vinegar. Stir that around, and then quickly add your crushed tomatoes, and then stir everything together. And at that point, you can add your salt, probably about a teaspoon of salt. We usually do a little bit of black pepper, maybe a little bit of paprika, and you can add extra, herbs or spices to taste at that point. But from there on out, once you add the tomatoes in, you're just letting it simmer and all combine for however long. Take it nice and low and slow, and it'll make a better sauce.
Nice. Okay. All right. So we have the sauce made. We have now the dough has risen, and we're ready to go. So
we'll take a piece of parchment paper.
Okay.
And sprinkle that with Durham wheat flour.
Okay.
Which makes a nice
semolina.
Yeah. Durham semolina.
Yeah.
So the bottom doesn't stick. It's got that nice kind of sandy texture.
That's a great
that
idea.
You get from pizzas, and we tend to just roll the dough out.
Okay,
because
roll it out.
It's pretty foolproof.
Okay.
You don't. You can stretch it by hand, but you might put like skinny, thin spots in it or holes, and that's annoying.
Yeah.
So
I like a combination of rolling it and doing it by hand to stretch around.
Yeah, and so you rolled it out, I think, to about maybe an 8-inch diameter circle. I can't remember, maybe 12-inch.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the finished pizza.
Yeah, maybe 12-inch.
That's half of it. Finished pizza was probably, at least about 10 inches across.
Okay, 10-inch diameter.
So yeah, probably close to 12-inch diameter, and then you roll the edges up.
Okay.
So you just go around and just roll.
Crimp them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can even pinch it, or you can do a little roll and get that crust over the edge so the sauce doesn't run out on you.
And then you'll add the sauce.
And you spread the sauce on it. Yeah, that's
and
good.
then we started with mozzarella on the base, and a little cheddar, and then Parmesan.
Sliced mozzarella on the base. That's always good.
Yep.
And then you added some shredded cheddar and Parmesan.
Yep.
For this particular one, but people could use whatever toppings they want.
Yeah. Whatever cheese and topping.
All right. And then into the glowing orb of the oven, the red hot oven at 500 something degrees over there, and
Should open it.
just
Oh yeah, I don't know if we did mention, but the stone needs to be in there once the oven comes up to temperature for at least an hour.
oh, okay.
An hour, 2 hours is better.
Wow.
Because the stone needs to get really hot too. So that's why we started preheating it earlier. Once we are, before you start making the sauce, you start with the dough, get your dough rising because that needs an hour or more. Then you can kick your oven on. Then you can start making your sauce.
Okay.
And then it will all be ready. 2 hours later when you're actually ready to have your pizza.
Got it. Okay, that's a good point. All right. Yeah, and then the pizza goes in onto the stone.
Did we say parchment?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you put the parchment paper
Stone.
right in. You kept the pizza right on the parchment paper.
Yep.
Yeah.
One time I didn't, and then I ended up making a calzone.
Yeah. It's just easier that way.
Because it wouldn't flip off, so then it all stuck to each other.
Yeah. All right. So that's good. And then you kept it in. You keep it in for at least 10 minutes. But
Yeah,
maybe longer.
probably more like 15 to
Yeah.
20.
So-
Also depends if you can have your oven hotter, then it will take less time. If your
Yeah,
oven's
if you
not
get
as
that
hot,
self-clean going.
there you go. Yeah, then maybe you can be like 8
And
minutes.
what you're looking
and
for
then-
is the cheese is bubbling and the edges of the crust are kind of browned. And there you go. But nothing is burned. So you keep an eye on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you bring it out, let it cool, and then you have pizza. Way to
That's
go. All right. Well, thanks for sharing your pizza making tips with us. We really appreciate it here on the Two Cat Kitchen.
All right.
Next up on the Two Cat Kitchen, we have Mr. O'Malley, taking the mystery out of history. Do you have any idea what he's planning on talking about?
Well, all I know is that he's going to be talking about a sticky situation.
Ooh, I have too many guesses about what that could be.
All right, let's check it out.
We take the mystery out of history on the Two Cat Kitchen Show.
Welcome to Taking the Mystery Out of History. I'm here with Mr. O'Malley. John, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So you have some information for us, I believe, on the Great Molasses Flood, is it?
Yes.
Molasses
the great
flood?
Molasses flood.
1919?
Who would have known?
Right.
A molasses flood in 1919
Wow.
in Boston, no less.
Boston, wow.
Right? Knocking at our door. The
Unbelievable.
molasses flowed.
So, first of all, let me just ask, how can you have a molasses flood?
Well,
That
that's
doesn't make any sense.
Usually you think of floods with water and only with water.
Yeah.
But molasses is mostly water,
Okay.
and in particular, this flood was started by a 50-foot high storage tank in the north end of Boston, which was an Irish and mostly Italian and Irish immigrant neighborhood. And it was close to the docks and you know, the Caribbean trade and in sugarcane goes back to colonial times. The triangle trade for slaves and sugarcane, and New England used the sugarcane to make rum, and molasses is the byproduct of sugarcane.
Oh.
And so in 1919 or 1915, this giant tank was built. It was 50 feet high and, like 95 feet in diameter. And it was made of metal. And it was right in this neighborhood of the North End. And it was, it was shoddily built. And in my research, I found out that molasses was also used to make alcoholic drinks like rum, but it was also used to make dynamite. Dynamite. Wow. And munitions. And in 1915, the United States was supplying all the munitions from for the World War I.
Oh, okay.
And so, and this was an era of no regulations. The people who built it didn't have to be certified engineers. They didn't even have to be certified architects. There was no regulations in terms of the safety of these structures. This tank was quickly built up, and it was steel, and the pop rivets on the steel were substandard, and it was mixed with manganese, which I'm getting scientific in the Two Cat Kitchen.
Wow.
and manganese weakens the steel.
Oh.
And makes it susceptible to temperature fluctuations. And the disaster, the flood, took place on January 5th. 1919, and it was an extremely high temperature, 40 degrees. Today that would be normal on January 5th. And so the mixture of cold air and warm molasses, because they topped off this tank with warmer molasses delivered from the Caribbean, and they topped it off days before that disaster. And little kids in the neighborhood would often go to the tank, and because there was always it always leaked molasses. So,
wow.
and they would, and it was reported like creaking and, noises coming from it, expansion and contraction. And one workman said, and he reported to the company, there's going to be a disaster.
Oh.
Because this thing is going to fail at some point. And the guy in charge, the workman, or was charge of management, said, well, it's still standing.
Yeah.
And again, there was no safety regulations.
And this thing was full of molasses at this point.
It was full of molasses.
It must have been
because of the temperature gradation increase, the cold air in the cold air in the tank met the warm air, and gases built up.
Oh, okay.
So by January 5th, it exploded.
Wow.
Yeah, it exploded. And 21 people were killed and 150 injured. And the molasses was 15 feet deep.
Unbelievable.
And 35 miles an hour it traveled out of the tank.
Whoa.
So it just...
So were people killed by the molasses or by the tank blowing up?
People were killed by molasses,
Oh.
and it destroyed a fire station. Firemen were playing cards in the fire station, and they rescued a bunch of the firemen and one fireman drowned in molasses because he couldn't hold on.
Wow.
And
That's terrible.
so a lot of people got killed or injured by fallen debris from buildings. It crushed mass transit trains and was a half a mile swath of like 3 or 4 blocks, 100 yards wide that got destroyed.
Unbelievable.
Got destroyed.
It's hard to imagine that there could be that much molasses, but I guess it was a very big tank.
And what was interesting about the molasses, if it happened in July, the death toll, they speculated, wouldn't have been so high because molasses in the heat would have flowed more smoothly and would have gone out in a wider area.
So it might not have been as deep, in other words.
It
the wave.
might not have been as deep. And as the temperature dropped, people were stuck in 1 foot of molasses. As the temperature dropped, the molasses became like solidified. It almost was like cement.
Wow.
And people were stuck in the molasses and they couldn't move, even though it was 1 foot deep. So,
Unbelievable. So did people they died from being stuck, even though it was only a foot deep?
Well, they mostly, the fire department and the police department and the Red Cross immediately came to the rescue, and 100 sailors who were training on a ship in Boston Harbor came and helped out. So there would have been far more deaths if they hadn't responded quickly. And there were 119 lawsuits after that.
Wow.
And the company defended itself by saying it was sabotage.
Oh.
It was sabotage because Italian immigrants were known or exaggerated, known as anarchists. And it was 1919, and there was anti-immigrant sentiment like there is today in the United States, but anti-Italian immigrants. And the company said, anarchists, Italian anarchists were to blame. And they blew up the storage tank. And the trial went on for 5 years. And they brought in the first lawsuit ever in the United States where they brought in expert witnesses.
Really? Interesting.
Expert witnesses like engineers and architects. The guy who designed the thing couldn't even read blueprints.
Wow.
So, there was no stamp of approval of an engineering society.
Yeah.
And this great flood, molasses flood, sparked all these regulations about building codes. You had to have a stamp on, the engineer had to sign off that this building was safe or this tank was safe, and it met certain specifications. And the judge ruled that the company was liable.
Oh.
They found no evidence of
Sabotage.
sabotage.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway,
Fascinating.
you know, I was obsessed with like, there's gotta be a lot of music written about this thing.
Okay. Well,
But, you know, I don't know if culturally it sparked a bunch of humor or songs, but it did spark political outrage at the lack of regulations.
oh, okay. Yeah.
And people say you can still smell molasses on a hot day after decades after this disaster.
Really, in the North End.
Yeah, in the
Wow.
North End.
Although I would think that in the North End they use a lot of molasses anyway in everyday life.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
maybe it gets
really.
mixed in. But
Yeah.
that's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And
Well, molasses, you know, this is before the era of sugar substitutes, and molasses was used again for alcoholic beverages, and especially rum and munitions, and it was used in baking
yeah.
all the time. And since
sounds
this
like-
is a show about a kitchen, right?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
The Two Cat Kitchen.
Yeah.
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 And it sounds like there are also industrial uses, maybe, because you said it was the industrial alcohol company.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
they converted the molasses into alcohol that was used for industrial processes
Yes.
as well at the
Yes.
time. You know,
Yeah.
Maybe it might be before there was a lot of synthetic chemistry going on, you know, and so people made things as best they could.
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
And it was right before the Prohibition era.
Ah, okay.
So, you know, people made a lot of money off alcoholic drinks.
Well, John, thanks so much. Thanks for taking the mystery out of the great molasses flood of 1919.
Yeah.
That was very informative.
Yeah.
That's all we have time for in this episode of Two Cat Kitchen.
We'd like to thank our musical guest, Jack McDonald.
And our special segment guest, Mr. O'Malley.
I'm Rick McKinney.
And I'm Sarah Grady. Join us next time right here at the
Two
Two
Cat
Cat Kitchen.
The two